Up. Guy who's responsible for putting together a national program for positive train control. It's been easy, I guess. It's nothing to it, I suppose. Real, you used to have here. Okay. Known Chris Jagodzinski for quite a while here, and he is spearheading the installation of PTC. He's going to give us some insight on what it's taking to operate not only on Amtrak-owned property, but also working with the host railroads as well, all through the nation. So please welcome Chris Jagodzinski.
So let me see if I can. Oh, there it is. It's already up there. So okay. So it's 3 o'clock. It's Friday. It's the end of the conference. So I'm going to see if I can keep you guys engaged here. We'll see how I do, right? And just after break, everybody's going to be coming off a sugar high over there. So first of all, Peter, John, thank you very much for the invitation to talk today. So I appreciate this, being down here. A lot of folks don't understand what PTC is and does, and so hopefully I can explain what some of the systems do and how does it work, and then also, where Amtrak is in the whole process anyway. And the second thing, just thank you for also, Peter and the group and everybody here for the support you do give to rail service, and thank you for the support you guys do give us. We do appreciate it. We need all the help we can get. Sometimes we're doing pretty good, but we always use more help. And just thank you to everybody for all your efforts here with that. So that being said, Amtrak has coast-to-coast implementation of PTC. So PTC, or positive train control, what is it and what does it do? So it's designed to do a couple different things. It's designed to prevent a train-to-train collision, an overspeed derailment, whether it's from a permanent speed restriction, temporary speed restrictions, things like that. If there's a work zone out on the tracks with roadway workers out there, it's designed to protect the workers to make sure a train doesn't, get into that work zone. Switches that are improperly aligned on the main line to make sure that the train either approaches the switch prepared to stop or at the correct speed, if a train is going to divert. And there's a couple of other things there too. One of the things that PTC does not prevent, it does not prevent grade crossing collisions. So if a garbage truck operator decides to ignore the active warning, active warning crossing protection, and drive his garbage truck into the front of the train with the Republican members of Congress like it did last year, PTC does not prevent that, okay? It doesn't prevent it. Just this morning, I have a train that's been terminated because a tractor trailer drove in front of it. The train was PTC equipped, drove in front of it. I got a picture of a piece of tractor trailer smashed right through the cab of that windshield of that locomotive. The P-42 locomotive is going to be out of service for some time. Once again, PTC does not prevent it, grade crossing accidents. That's something the public doesn't understand. PTC was put in, the laws were passed after the Chatsworth accident in California, in the Rail Safety Improvement Act of 2008, right, is when that got passed as a result of that, and very unfortunate deaths. But one of the other leading causes of death and injuries actually in the rail industry is grade crossing. You heard them talking about it earlier in one of the presentations. PTC doesn't prevent that, and folks don't necessarily understand that. It doesn't help you with a trespasser on the railroad either. But it does help you with a number of different things, a number of different catastrophic accidents. Some things have happened, obviously. Folks have read about some Amtrak accidents in recent years, and there's a number of other, freight examples too. It does do a good job of preventing some of the stuff from happening. So there is a regulation that was passed back in 2008, requires a couple different things. And some folks are like, well, what's the deadline? What do you have to do? What have to do by when? So there was a deadline that just passed, December 31st, 2018. There's a couple conditions that all railroads had to kind of meet. One, you had to have all your PTC hardware installed on your main line or on your tracks. You have to have all your radio spectrum. You had to be operating, this is for the Class 1s in Amtrak now, you have to have at least 50% of your miles operating by December 31st, 2018, and all your employees had to be trained. If you met all those conditions, you can file for what they call an alternative schedule, and you really have 2 extra years until December 31st, 2020 to get everything done. So just about every railroad in this country, except for 4, did apply for an alternative schedule. All the Class 1s applied, Amtrak applied, we were granted it. We're doing a lot of stuff, and I'll show you in a few minutes where we are. But this is what the regulation permits. Everybody said, oh, we're going to shut down all service on December 31st, and it's going to be illegal to operate if you don't get your stuff done. Not quite. This is kind of how the regulation is laid out here, as you can see. So most railroads are still working. We have a lot of miles that are under PTC already. A lot of stuff is working, but there's still yet a lot of work to be done to get things finished up. So who's responsible? It's quite a complicated place. The railroad industry, people don't understand the complexity of it, especially when you have host and tenants, and I'll get to that in just a few minutes here. So, but there's PTC infrastructure, there's communications infrastructure, some of that Ron was talking about this morning in his presentation. That's responsibility of who owns the tracks. The wayside, the signal system, once again, who owns the tracks. Testing, that's a joint effort between the folks who are operating the trains and the folks who actually maintain the tracks too, because everything has to be tested to work with each other. So whether it's an Amtrak train on UP track, a BNSF train on Amtrak's tracks, and Norfolk Southern train on Amtrak tracks, so all that stuff has to be tested. All those possible combinations and permutations actually need to be tested to make sure everything's working. Locomotive and onboard systems, all right? Each railroad operator is responsible for outfitting these systems onto their own locomotives. And then there's a whole bunch of things in the back, we call them back office servers or bosses, which actually process this data. And there's a whole computer network back there talking, exchanging information back and forth about consist data, crew data, signal data. There's a whole lot of stuff that goes on in the background here. Which has to be installed, tested. Amtrak's got a back office server, UP, BN, and we have to have all those communication links with all of us. And it's not just Amtrak to BNSF and Amtrak to UP, but it also could be between UP and BNSF. It could be between UP and TRE, when that happens. Amtrak and TRE. So you can just imagine the possible combinations and links there that have to be put together to get this extremely complex system working. So let's just start with Amtrak, okay? Amtrak, we have a 21,600, give or take, mile network, all right, in the country. Only about 900 of those miles, this is route miles now, are actually owned and operated by Amtrak, all right? So Amtrak is, we call it the host, in about 900 miles. The rest of the 20,000 plus miles, Amtrak is a tenant on these other railroads. So, in one way, we're installing PTC on our own territory, which is mostly in the Northeast. We have some territory in New Orleans, Michigan, Chicago, and the Midwest. The rest of it's all in the Northeast. And then all of our other territory, we are what we call a tenant. It's a little bit of a different relationship. We have to work with all of those other railroads we operate over, BNSF, UP, Metrolink, North County, the list goes on, where, we have a different relationship and we have different things to do. On Amtrak's tracks, we have two different systems. So say PTC, but there's a number of different solutions out there. Amtrak is actually operating 3 PTC systems, okay? On Amtrak's own tracks, we have a system called Access, the Advanced Civil Speed Enforcement System. We also operate a second system called ITCS. On the next slide, I'll kind of explain what each of these 3 systems are. The freight carriers, and mostly off-corridor, have chosen to go with a different system called IETMS, or the Interoperable Electronic Train Management System. Actually first developed, I believe, with the BNSF way back when. You guys are a pioneer for some of that stuff from way back when, and it has really been rolled out nationwide with a lot of stuff, I'm going to say outside the Northeast corridor, okay? All these systems require, fulfill the regulation or the regulatory requirement for a PTC system. There's a couple of other systems out there. There's a system called EATC used by some other railroads and some other places, but these are the 3 systems that Amtrak is using. So out of the 3 systems, we'll talk about with Access first. Amtrak has actually been using this system since 2000. When we introduced 150-mile-an-hour service on the Northeast Corridor back when Acela was introduced, we said, you know what, the existing safety systems we have right now are not good enough. We need to do something more, because you don't want to be just going down a railroad that, hey, at 150 mile an hour, that wayside signal goes by you pretty quickly. Was it green? Was it red? What color was that again? If you blink, you're going to miss it. We needed something else to ensure that, the trains ran safe. So, we actually started developing this in the 1990s and was implemented in service since 2000. It's a vital system, and it actually uses transponders. GPS, some other systems use GPS, but, our tracks, I don't know if anybody has taken a train to New York City. We do go underneath the Hudson River. We're underneath Manhattan. GPS doesn't work too well when you're 100 feet below the streets of Manhattan. GPS is not going to work for you, especially when you get into, I have 5, 6, 7 tracks wide. Is the GPS good enough to say I'm on this track or that track or that track? You you can't rely on that. So it uses a transponder-based system, similar to folks here got toll tag, right? The RFID tag that's in your car with the reader. That's what it is. And in fact, the tags are installed at the track. It gives you a precise position, especially when you're in tunnels, especially when you're within all the bridges and the overbuild stuff we have back in the Northeast. It's been pretty successful. It worked well. It works well as a good passenger system for back in the Northeast. ITCS is a system Amtrak's used since the current version's been in service since 2011. We've actually been running it, I think, since 2005, I guess, in Michigan. So it's, once again, a certified system. It allows us to operate at speeds up to 110 miles an hour in Michigan service. We currently operate on about 100 miles on the west end of Michigan. We just actually filed some paperwork with the FRA today, to one of the two people, I think, working at the FRA today. It went over there. So probably within another month, we're going to expand the use of that system all the way across the rest of the Michigan line, all the way east into Detroit. Hopefully within the next month or so, we'll be able to turn that on. That'll support 110 mile an hour operation across that whole state there. IETMS at the bottom of the screen here. Once again, it's pretty much used by all the Class 1 freight carriers and many of the commuter agencies that operate on the freight carriers, such as Metrolink, Sound Transit. TRE is working on theirs now. The TRE local here will be installing IETMS, and we've been talking with them about that. And it supports operations up to 90 mile an hour based on the technology that's available. And that one uses a GPS. It's a GPS-based solution. It works fine for them out here. And the one nice thing about the IETMS system, it's pretty good. It's really good for the freight trains, and it actually has a pretty good braking algorithm. So every freight train is unique. So if a 15,000-ton coal train is going to brake one way versus an intermodal train is going to brake a different way, and the onboard system knows exactly what's on that train, how much the stuff weighs, how many pounds of grain it's got, how many pounds of coal it's got, how many pounds of lumber it's got, and it will calculate what the true stopping distance is for the train to make sure that the safety margins are not exceeded on the train. IETMS does a real good job with that. So, one thing about Amtrak here that makes it really complicated for us is we go a lot of different places in this country, and we operate on a lot of other railroads. So out of the three systems, you can see Access, where I have a Northeast Corridor. I have 10 tenants that operate on my railroad in the Northeast Corridor, such as New Jersey Transit, MARC, SEPTA, MBTA, CONDOT, the PNW Railroad, the CSX. They're all out there. I have 10 Access tenants who actually have to have access on their systems. Amtrak also is operating or will be operating on 3 other host railroads that are also having access. Okay, so I need a whole fleet of access engines. ITCS, a little bit simpler because it's only in Michigan, so Amtrak uses it for the passenger trains, and Norfolk Southern is my only tenant on the Michigan line where they use it for their freight trains in Michigan. Okay, IETMS, if you look at that equation, I will have IETMS in the Chicago terminal, so I will have some tenants in my Chicago terminal with IETMS, where Amtrak is the host, but Amtrak is a tenant. I have to federate with 20 other railroads around this country that I need to do some work with. I mean, Amtrak's actually on the cutting edge for some of this. So right now, Amtrak is working actively, we call it the words interoperable, with 6 railroads right now around the country, including NS, CSX, BNSF, UP, NCTD, and Metrolink. Bob, I can write that down for you later. I know I'm talking fast. Who talks fast, me or Tony Hatch? Who talks faster? I don't know, it's a tie. It's a tie vote, right? He's from New York. A little bit faster than me. I'm just a Philly guy, so, all right. But anyway, so if you look at that, 20 tenants. I mean, there are 20 hosts out there to federate with, and that's all a complicated process that goes through a whole lot of stuff to kind of get that stuff done. All right, there's a testing, federation, there's a lot of steps here. And no railroad right now. I actually have a train, if I'm a Pacific Surfliner train, operating out of Los Angeles, I'm going to San Diego. I have to do, when I'm the engineer, I climb up on the engine. I'm going to log onto the screen, say, I'm Chris, I'm operating train, pick a number, 564 today. I work for Amtrak, I'm going to hit the Amtrak button. I need to talk to Metrolink, I have to hit the Metrolink button. I'm going to talk to BNSF, I have to hit that button. And North County, which handles the railroad from Oceanside to San Diego. So Amtrak is actually talking to 4 of these servers all at the same time to get this to get the system to work, download all the data, and you have to do that within the 10 minutes you got to get out of the station. All right? Complicated, and so we're still going through some bugs. You'll see some OTP issues out there right now, but we're working through them. In fact, we were just out there last week. We did a big audit just to go through and whittle down and drive the errors and drive the bugs out of the system, and to get everything working there. So, I mean, it becomes very complicated. No railroad in the country is doing that right now, and ultimately, All right. Ultimately, believe it or not, Amtrak will have the most because we will actually ultimately do a 6-road initiative someday out of Chicago. But if folks ever ride the Cardinal or the Hoosier State, we actually go on like 5 railroads in the first 25 miles leaving Chicago. It's a real alphabet route the way the train goes. And so it's particularly complicated out there. So I don't think any of these freight railroads are going to have to, deal with that. So anyway, in order to do that, I need locomotives on these systems. So here's a whole list of all the Amtrak locomotives that are out there and where I'm at right now. I have to have more than one system on my locomotives. Some of the locomotives are IETMS, okay, and they're part of the national network. Like a lot of the P42 locomotives we use for the long distance trains are just IETMS, and that's fine. Some of the locomotives just access, a Acela Express. It's really not going to go too many places. Not without a really long extension cord. It's not going to go a lot of places, right? So it pretty much stays in the Northeast Corridor. It's only got access along with my ACS 64 electric locomotives. But then I have a group of P40s that are up there somewhere. There's 38 of them you can see right now have access. I'm going to make that 40 soon. But they share different territories. Some of the P42 locomotives also have ITCS because they operate in Michigan. So they're going to have ITCS and IETMS. So, we have to manage this fleet like that and make sure, we keep everything separated. The different systems are being tested right. And so it's quite the complicated process, I'm checking the fuel efficiency of the locomotive because I think I'm going to have some aerodynamic drag with all the antennas I got to carry on the roof for all these different systems right now. So we'll see how our fuel economy goes out the window there. But you kind of get a sense of some of the stuff that we have to manage to make sure we're interoperable, with these different fleets. And some folks can say, well, geez, why didn't everybody just go with the same system? Well, this is all new stuff that's being developed. The access works great on the Northeast Corridor. It's great for passenger trains. It's great for fast stuff. The transponders are good, but it also works with cab signaling, and it doesn't understand the difference between freight trains. Northeast Corridor is not a mountain railroad. It's kind of flat, so it treats all freight trains the same. All right? That won't work for the freight railroads. If you want to bring a coal train down the mountain, it doesn't understand the difference between a coal train or an intermodal train. Once again, it doesn't do it. That's why IETMS is a good solution for the freight trains where they are. All right? And so there's different solutions for different jobs. Ultimately, maybe 20 years down the road, things will, there's different technologies which will kind of merge into each other and we'll get to somewhere like that. But the technology and the development of it just doesn't support it quite yet. So this is my life right now. So where Amtrak is, this is actually the FRA has us doing, all the railroads doing a quarterly report. The last one that was published was Q3 2018. All right. Most of my locomotives are done. I've got 9 out of my 11 track segments done. Actually, a whole lot of the stuff, if you look, the Q4 report, actually, it's in my, I got to review it. We're sending it, it's due to the FRA next week. But you'll see a whole lot of these numbers, most of these numbers come up at 100% here. You can go on the FRA website and see how we're doing. So we're doing okay. We met all the statutory requirements. We've got 900 track miles to do. You can see it's 67% there. Today I got 62. Hopefully in a month I'll have 99% of my track miles done, and by spring I should have 100% of my track miles equipped, in 2019 is what our goal is here. But you can go on the FRA website, look it up, and you can see how the different railroads are doing. The freight railroads are doing well, got a lot of miles rolled out. Some of the other passenger railroads have had a late start, particularly the thing that's really kind of stung the passenger railroads is, the act was passed, it cost a lot of money to do this stuff, and a lot of the agencies, though, that were doing this, just didn't have the resources to go get started on this, and plus a lot of the small agencies don't have a big robust signal staff or train control staff to go work on this stuff, and so they've been struggling with some of that. The funding pipeline was not open in 2008. There have been a number of rail grants that have been out there recently. Congress, the FRA have had a lot of PTC grants recently that have been approved, so they can get done now. So the money coming to help these other agencies that are definitely late to the game, but everybody should be on target to get everything done by 2020 here. This is Amtrak's national network, how we are as of January the 1st. So you can see a couple different things here. You can see the white is actually where PTC is in service right now around our network. So out of our 21,000, so we're scheduled to put in PTC on 20,000 miles of our 21,000 mile network. I'll get to the pieces that are missing in a minute here. We're at about 83%, okay? About 83% of the network is done as of January the 1st year. A couple of other colors. Green, the green on the map represents PTC, which is scheduled to go into service during 2019. All right, so you see a lot of stuff on the Canadian National, Canadian Pacific. We're expecting them, and we're dealing with, in fact, I was just talking to CP 2 days ago here. We're going to be doing some stuff with them starting in February, so you're going to see a lot of those railroads rolling out in 2019. There's still a couple yellow pieces up there. Yellow represents railroads that are going to kind of come in service during 2020, based on the current project schedules. You can kind of see where they are. Blue represents what we call MTEA, Main Track Exclusion Addendum territory. That means there's not a lot of freight traffic there. So in some cases where you run some freight traffic, but you don't have a lot of dangerous traffic, a lot of hazardous material, or you don't run a whole lot of passenger trains, or just not a whole lot of trains in general, you can apply to the FRA for an MTA, which means PTC is not required for that line. And those lines are represented in blue, for a couple of different stretches around the country, okay? So in some cases, though, Amtrak's goal is to get 100% of the network installed with PTC. You can see there's a couple of purple sections here where some funding grants have been received. You can see one section on the BNSF out in western Kansas there. There's another section on the Union Pacific, which we'll be working with those railroads to get PTC, although it's not required by regulation, there's funding available to turn it on, and we actually have some additional funding in the bank that's been in some of our congressional appropriations, and we're working with a couple of the other railroads so we can take in some of the other tracks that are blue and actually turn them purple too to install PTC in those missing pieces there. So that's where we are. All right. The challenges going forward here, reliability. All right. So nobody had a great working system. Even the access worked pretty smoothly, but it's limited in terms of what it does. But just, some of the software is being developed on the fly, and we have, and we find software issues. Any new system always has issues with it, okay, to work through that. Interoperability increases complexity. I talked about Los Angeles. 4 railroads talk. Well, what happens if one of those 4 railroads goes bad? Does the whole house of cards come tumbling down? Or can I deselect that one railroad and run on the other 3? And how do you work through those issues? It just increases the complexity and the number of people that you have to talk to kind of keep everything worked out. Limited resources, all right? The vendor pool, baby boomers are retiring all over the place. It's hard to get experienced people in the rail industry. We have been struggling for years to do, more with less in this industry to find the qualified people, whether it's in the vendors or in the railroad staff on both sides, The one nice thing, though, that I do see here, and I see some other folks in the room here, I've been, I can't believe it, 30 years now, 30 years with Amtrak, actually, 32 on the railroad, but 30 with, actually this year it'll be 30 with Amtrak. Can't believe it. But, there are some other younger people now coming into the industry, which is great. And we actually have some very good young people. So all the stories you hear about millennials don't want to work hard and they just text on their phone all day. It's not quite true. There's a couple like that. But we also do have some very good young people coming into the industry now who are doing some stuff, but the question is going to be, how do you get them trained up? How do you got a lot of railroad experience that have walked out the door here. How do you get those folks trained? And it's a big challenge, though, to get, qualified resources to do a lot. There's a lot of work to be done all at the same time here. And then lastly, regulatory review. I mean, the way that the regulation was written, it's a little clunky in some things, and there's, it handles 80-90% of it, but then there's always these oddball details you have to figure out. Well, it didn't quite contemplate the real world in this situation or that situation, and you have to go work through stuff with the FRA. How do you apply the rule? How do you make sure, they review it? They have a lot of stuff that they're doing right now, and the government shutdown right now, frankly, doesn't help either. As you go through it. So, some of the challenges here, the regulatory review we're going to get through, it's the pressure, we got through the first deadline in 2018. The pressure's coming off. Folks are kind of getting up to speed. Things are kind of kicking in high gear now. The money's flowing to the commuter agencies. We're getting there. It's just going to be a matter of, rolling the stuff out and troubleshooting through the problem. So, what questions do you have for me? So the PTC system is really an overlay on the existing signal system, okay? So you could, with anything, there's always risk to do anything, okay? So there are security measures in place. In fact, one of the hardest issues in terms of complexity that we had to deal with was working what we call the keys, okay? There's a thing called a key exchange server, okay? So like a couple years ago, like if I was on the road, I had this little key fob, right? And I had the numbers changed. I would type in the number at the time so everything was encrypted. all of our locomotives have that sort of encryption on them, okay? And we have to deal with the BNSF has one encryption standard, UP's got a different encryption standard, and and all of our locomotives are tied in, and so we've got all sorts of security set up on the message. That's one of the pieces of complication actually is the cybersecurity that's with that system that actually causes them problems. We've actually found that once you get through the cybersecurity issues and get through all those firewalls and stuff like that, once you pierce that and get that fixed, the rest of the stuff kind of goes okay. All right, but let's say in the worst case scenario, you get some, I don't know if it's, I don't know who, the Russians, I guess maybe the Russians, right, want to hack into the engine or something like that. Really, on the railroad, the one thing about the railroad is that the railroad, a lot of stuff is designed to fail safe, okay? So you're not going to be able to hack into the system at very least and say, oh, I'm going to now make this train go 100 mile an hour through the curve when it should be doing 20. That's really not going to happen. The worst thing they could probably do is they're going to make the train come to a stop when you don't want it to. So it becomes a reliability issue. It doesn't become a safety issue, if you have an issue like that. So, Bob? So, well, it could go into a couple different buckets, okay? It could be one, there could be a problem with a wayside component, okay? So the train, as it moves down the track, is constantly pulling. There's a radio system on the train. You heard Ron talk about this 220 network. Well, there's a 220 radio network. There's also kind of a cellular backup network that's out there, too. And the train is always targeted to the wayside, getting status updates. How's that signal? How's the next signal? And if anything causes a break in that comm link, for example, it could cause it to go out. There could be a problem with your on board. Something has a hiccup on board and it locks up in the computer. Boom, it's going to once again fail safe. It's going to cause that train to stop. The engineer maybe say, hey, it wasn't putting the brakes on fast enough to satisfy the computer. That's been an thing, actually, with our locomotive engineers. I've been running a train for 30 years. I always put the brake on same place at the same time. The engineer can glide right in. I'm sure they know a lot, right? But, the PTC system is always designed, though, to say, okay, there's always an extra margin of safety, though, add on to the PTC system. So the engineers have to relearn, you can't just run the train like you always did. There's a lot of visual cues up there, but it's a matter of them learning it. And the computer doesn't like the way that if you're the engineer running the train, it's going to bring the train to a stop. So it could be any number of different things. The wheel slip, if the wheel slip, you have a brake wheel slip, that's really not a big issue. The wheel slip itself is not a big issue. I mean, occasionally, so I'm qualified to run trains. I run the Acela, and one of the, it's beautiful, but it's the worst time of the year for me, is October in New England, okay? I love it. I've worked in New England for a number of years. I love it. It's beautiful up there. The leaves on the rail up there are terrible, okay? And like when you're supposed to be doing 110 and all of a sudden you get a breakaway wheel slip and next thing you know, you think the train's doing 120 and you're going to get these alarms and you're messing with the brake and, so that's a pain, okay? And occasionally you can catch it though. It's just, so there are some issues like that. It's really not big issues though. Once again, it fails safe though too if something happens, so. Yes, sir, in the back. Yeah. So no locomotive actually has three systems, okay? So the locomotive has one or two, okay? So I've got access, I've got IETMS, I've got IETMS and ITCS, I've got IETMS and, so it's a little hard to see in those numbers. I could break down the list a little bit differently, but you can see there's a couple different ways you can slice this pie here. So, but for example, let's take, for example, Michigan, okay? So if I'm going to run a train from Chicago to Detroit to Pontiac, I need to have both IETMS, which will be for the NS and the CN piece of the trip, and the ITCS, which is the Amtrak piece of the trip. Both those systems must be working to dispatch the train in the future. Because right now, that little section of NS and that section of CN is not turned on yet. It will be in 2019. But right now, all I need is the ITCS. So as a matter of fact, all my Michigan engines right now that I'm running today, technically, have ITCS only. They're not working with IETMS. So if you notice, P40, where's my P42s up there? P42 is 100, 184. You see I've only got 165 actually equipped with ITMS. The big difference is the Michigan units. In fact, some of those units, as soon as I change some things over, those units are actually going to get stored and parked, and I'm going to be starting running chargers up there shortly. Right, yeah, yeah. So it only needs to be working for the systems I need for that trip. Does that make that clear? Okay, yes, sir. Mhm. So the freight railroads, first of all, are very interested in looking at what they can do to get that thing vital. Because once you get to a vital certification from the FRA, it opens the gates to a number of other different things the freight railroads are looking at in terms of how do you handle paperwork and speed restrictions and even, frankly, number of crew members you need on the train. You know, and so some of the stuff was alluded to earlier today. But we'll see what happens, okay? We'll see what happens, because there's some folks at the FRA who are always adamant this is the way it is, you know, and some of those folks aren't there anymore. You know, there's any number of different things. Just because that's what's in the regulation doesn't mean you can't make a case and do a pilot project and write a waiver against it to go do something different, okay? You know, the first thing we need to do for Illinois, though, and in fact, I'll be in Omaha next week with the UP working on this, is what do we need to do so we can get at least running 90 mile an hour for the Chicago, for Joliet to, you know, St. Louis, okay? That's the first step. You know, we have to get, you know, there's an overlay system for the crossing protection there. We have to get that working, that tested, make sure that's running safely. We're going to raise those to 59 if you don't have cab signals, okay? So there's a variety of different things there. There's some of the slower speed rules, though. There's actually an interesting thing in the regulation that says the FRA is prohibited from enforcing the new speeds for PTC failures until 1 year after the last Class 1 railroad goes fully interoperable. So the Class 1s are fighting to see who's going to be the last one to close the barn door, but we know it's going to be on December 31st, 2020. So that really says the FRA cannot enforce those new speeds until December 31st, 2021. So that's when it's going to be required from a regulatory standpoint. Some other railroads, for example, such as Metrolink. Metrolink is one of the railroads in the country that did not file for an extension. They are choosing to, what they call, take the early adopters provision. So actually, if I have a problem on Metrolink right now, I'm doing 59 miles an hour if my PTC doesn't work. Am I just about out of time? We got one more? I've been looking this way. I'm sorry. Anybody over here have questions? In the back. Yes, sir. With the which line? Well, if you go right here, so we'll see. So I can't answer all the questions about that. I can only answer what I know, okay? There's been a lot of stuff going on about this whole line here. You can see, I'm going to try this little cool pointer here. I've never tried this before. See, let's see. Oh, there it is. See right there? See that purple? So right there, there's about 180 miles. It's about 180 miles of track right there. So we got a purple. So we got our first Chrissy grant from Dodge City out to a place called Los Animas Junction. We're going to start putting PTC on that line there. I don't know if you guys can see. I don't know if it'll show up over there. It's out there somewhere, yeah? You know, so we'll see. There's still some blue in New Mexico. There's still an unanswered question about the maintenance in New Mexico. There's still about 200 miles of railroad out there that's going to have to be addressed. I mean, the good news about New Mexico is it doesn't rain that much, you know, and the ties that are on the ground don't rot out. It's not like, you know, a tie in Jacksonville, Florida. So, you know, but, you know, there are some serious issues with that line which do need to be addressed, though. So I will be around, guys. You can find me. I'm here till, you know, we're done. So I'm not skipping out early. So thank you very much. So, okay, thank you. All right. All right.